$259 billion. That's what a family company that makes handbags by hand is worth today, in 2026. A company with 230 stores worldwide. To put that in perspective, LVMH, the luxury giant that owns Louis Vuitton, Dior, Givenchy, and 72 other brands, has over 6,000 stores and is worth less. But the absurd part isn't that. The absurd part is how they do it. Hermès doesn't advertise its star product. You can't buy it on their website. You can't order it in store. And if you walk in to ask, a salesperson will tell you, with the most polite smile, that it's not available, that you come back another day, that you buy a scarf. How is it possible that a company that says no to its own customers has double the profit margin of the company that says yes to the whole world?
The system Hermès discovered, Corklith, and almost nobody dares to copy Forklith, can be summed up in one sentence: controlled scarcity as an architecture of power. It's not that they can't make more handbags, it's that they chose not to. And that choice, that deliberate decision to produce less than what the market demands a pog, is the most elegant money-making machine ever built.
To understand how that machine works, you have to know where it comes from. And the story begins with a craftsman and a horse. In 1837, a German craftsman of French origin named Thierry Hermès opens a small workshop in Paris. He doesn't sell handbags, he sells horse harnesses, the best harnesses in Europe. So good, they end up in the stables of Napoleon III and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. The business thrives for decades, father to son, son to grandson. The Hermès family becomes synonymous with craftsmanship for the aristocracy. But at the start of the 20th century, an invention changes everything: the automobile. Suddenly, horses and harnesses become obsolete. This is where most companies would have died. But Thierry's grandson, Émile Maurice Hermès, does something brilliant. He looks at the workshop, sees the hides, sees the needles, sees the craftsmen who have spent decades sewing the highest quality leather, and says, if we know how to make the best harness in the world, we know how to make the best handbag in the world.
Look at this. Émile Maurice didn't pivot through a new product into Hermès. He pivoted to be SAM clasped with a new client. The craftsman, the techniques, the leather, everything was the same. Only who was buying it changed. And that decision, transferring your technical advantage to a new market, instead of learning a new craft, the tray, is the smartest way to survive obsolescence.
Hermès starts making handbags. In 1935, they create the sac à dépêche, an elegant briefcase with a strap closure. And this is where luck, or the system, starts to work. In 1956, actress Grace Kelly, newly married to the Prince of Monaco, appears on the cover of Life magazine covering her pregnancy with that handbag. The next day, thousands of women walk into Hermès stores asking for the Kelly bag. Hermès renames it. The Kelly is born as an icon. But the moment that really changed everything happened on a plane, almost 30 years later. 1984. Jean-Louis Dumas, president of Hermès, fourth generation of the family, is seated on a Paris-London flight. Next to him, a woman struggles with her handbag. Things fall to the floor and curses that she can't find a handbag that is beautiful and practical for a mother with young children. That woman is Jane Birkin, actress and British singer. Dumas grabs an air sickness bag from the plane, flips it over, and sketches a roomy handbag with compartments, a padlock closure, and a double handle. He tells her, "I'll make it for you, and it will bear your name." That's how the Birkin was born. But the important thing is not the design. The important thing is the decision Hermès made, and that no one in the luxury industry dared to make. Every Birkin would be crafted from start to finish by a single craftsman. One person cuts the leather, prepares it, sews it, shapes it, applies the finish, and signs it. The process takes up to 40 hours. There is no assembly line. There is no robotic factory. There is no efficiency. Meanwhile, Louis Vuitton produces tens of thousands of handbags per day in factories spread across the world.
Think about what just happened. A luxury company, in the middle of the mass production era, it voluntarily decides that every handbag should take a WEK to be made. Does that sound like bad management? It's the most brilliant move in the history of retail. Because when a craftsman spends 40 hours sewing a handbag, you can't make more handbags, even if you want to. And when you can't make more handbags, the market goes crazy. It's a technical limitation between the luxury industry's greatest competitive advantage.
And that limitation created the most sophisticated system in the world for selling something without looking like it. Because here's what Hermès really does. It doesn't sell handbags. It sells access. There is no official waiting list for the Birkin. You can't walk into a store, ask for one, and wait. What you have to do is buy other things. Lots of other things. Scarves, belts, shoes, tableware, perfumes. Experts estimate you need to spend between $10,000 and $20,000 on other products before a salesperson, with whom you've built a relationship over months, offers you the chance to buy a $12,000 Birkin. And it's no use buying just anything. There are bait products, the basic bracelets, the Oran sandals, the belt with the H, that their own salespeople read as, "This client doesn't understand the brand." The ones who get a Birkin are those who buy clothing, fine jewelry, home decor, the categories that prove you know the Hermès universe and don't just want the trophy. In other words, Hermès has designed a system where the client has to prove they are worthy of giving them their money, and the clients compete to do it. The result of this system is mathematically devastating. Hermès has an operating margin of 44%, nearly double LVMH's 25%. It spends only 4.5% of its revenue on marketing. LVMH spends 12%. It has 230 stores where Louis Vuitton has 457. And 80% of its growth doesn't come from opening new stores. It comes from billing more in the ones it already has.
See what happened? Hermès sells less to earn more. Fewer handbags, but each one worth more. It has fewer stores, but each one bills more. It spends less on advertising because its own clients do the advertising by bragging about how hard it was to eat the bag. Controlled scarcity as an architecture of power. It's a system where every no the company says generates more money than any competitor's yes.
And there is one figure that sums it all up. A Birkin bought for $12,000 regularly resells for $30,000 or more. Between 1980 and 2015, the average annual appreciation of a Birkin was 14.2% versus the S&P 500's 8.7%. A leather handbag went up in value more than the stocks of the best companies in the world. A handbag made of leather stitched by one person in a workshop. And it's worth more than your investment fund. Welcome to the economy of Hermes. But this system, this perfect machine of scarcity and desire, was about to face its greatest threat. Because someone was watching. Someone who had spent decades buying luxury brands like collecting trading cards. His name was Bernard Arnault. They called him the Cashmere Wolf. And in 2010, he struck. Bernard Arnault had spent decades building LVMH, the largest luxury conglomerate on the planet, buying brands one after another. Dior, Givenchy, Bulgari, Fendi, Tiffany, more than 75 brands in total. His method was always the same: buy shares in silence until he had enough power to impose conditions and take control. They called him the Cashmere Wolf because he dressed impeccably while devouring companies. But there was one brand that resisted him. Just one. Hermes. In October 2010, Arnault called Patrick Thomas, the CEO of Hermes, and not a Hermes by blood. For 170 years, only family members had led the company. But Thomas was the first outside executive they put in charge, while Thomas was peacefully cycling through the French countryside. He told him, with complete nonchalance, that LVMH had acquired 14.2% of Hermes and was going for more. Thomas had 2 hours before the news hit the press. He had done it in secret, using a financial trick so his name wouldn't appear on the purchases. He paid several banks to buy Hermes shares on his behalf, and when he had accumulated enough, they transferred them all to him at once.
Arnault didn't want the handbags, he wanted the machine, the system that turned scarcity into money.
And you know what the Hermes family did? Exactly what they've been doing since 1837. Protect the workshop. In a matter of weeks, more than 50 descendants of Thierry Hermes, cousins, nephews, branches of the family who barely spoke to each other, came together with one single goal: to stop Arnault from taking the company. They created a fortified holding company called H51 that grouped 54% of the shares with an iron rule. If any family member wanted to sell, they had to offer their shares first to the holding. No one could sell to Arnault without everyone else's permission. And then they went to legal war. They reported LVMH to the AMF, the French stock market regulator, which is basically the police that watches who buys and sells shares, for having concealed those purchases. In Europe, when someone buys more than 5% of a publicly traded company, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or a pension fund, you are obligated to make it public so the rest of the investors know. Arnault broke that rule knowingly. The AMF investigated and fined LVMH 8 million euros for concealing his maneuver. In December 2014, Arnault surrendered. LVMH distributed all its Hermes shares, which at that point were worth $7.5 billion, among the investors who held LVMH shares, including Arnault himself. It was not a gift. Each LVMH shareholder received their proportional share of those Hermes stocks. But by no longer being in the hands of one single company, the shares scattered among thousands of individual investors who could no longer coordinate a hostile takeover. The Cashmere Wolf left empty-handed.
Why is Hermes impossible to replicate from outside? Because if you try to scale it, you destroy it.
If Arnault had taken control and tried to scale production to multiply profits, he would have destroyed exactly what makes the company valuable. More handbags means less scarcity. Less scarcity means less desire. And less desire means a Birkin goes from being a financial asset to being a handbag. The system only works if someone has the patience not to touch it. And that patience is something a family of craftsmen has, and an investment fund will never understand. 10 years after that battle, in April 2025, Hermès surpassed LVMH in market capitalization to become the most valuable luxury company in the world. The same company Arnault tried to buy is now worth more than his entire empire of 75 brands. 6 generations of the Hermès family are still in charge. While the rest of the luxury sector suffered a sales drop in 2024, Hermès grew 13%, with 230 stores where others need thousands, with craftsmen who sew by hand where others have robotic factories, and with a list of clients who compete to spend money before Hermès allows them to buy what they really want. The company that says no ended up being worth more than the one that said yes to everyone. If that's not a business lesson, I don't know what is.
Forced scarcity isn't a marketing trick, it's a value architecture. Produce less than the market demands. The market pays more per unit, clients do your marketing, and your product appreciates, ours not depreciates. Hermès understood what most entrepreneurs refuse to accept, that selling LESS can be your most profitable decision.
And that lesson has a second, equally important side. Hermès doesn't just limit how much it produces, it limits how much you can access. The whole system of spend $15,000 before you can buy a Birkin is not a brand whim. It's a revenue machine disguised as exclusivity. Every client who wants a Birkin ends up spending 2 or 3 times more than they had planned, because the bag works like a permanent carrot. You buy scarves because you want a bag. You buy tableware because you want the bag. And when they finally offer it to you, you've already spent more than the Birkin's price. And on top of that, you feel grateful.
Think about that for a moment. Hermès may be out of BUYing, feel like a prize and not a transaction. The client doesn't think I'm paying $12,000. No, they think they chose me. That power shift, where the seller outranks the buyer pawn, is probably the greatest feat in consumer history.
But perhaps the deepest lesson from Hermès isn't in scarcity or access. It's in the craftsman. A single craftsman who sews a single bag over 40 hours. That decision, which any financial consultant would call inefficiency, is the reason nobody can compete with them. Because to copy Hermès, it's not enough to make a pretty bag. You need craftsmen who take a decade to train, a company culture that prioritizes quality over volume, and a family willing to earn less today to be worth more tomorrow. It's the modern anti-company. Everything the market tells you not to do, and precisely why it works.
Here's the question that hurts. How much of your business are you giving away by making it too easy? How often have you dropped the price, said yes too fast, or overproduced porny just because you could? Hermès built a $259 billion empire with one word most entrepreneurs are afraid to use: no. The question isn't whether you can make more, it's whether you have the courage to make less.